speak. Please keep your microphone on mute when you're not speaking, and please can I also ask that any questions get brief and to the point. We'll be timing me to speak to you this evening, and an alarm will sound when you're speaking for 4 minutes. Now, we've got quite a lot of public speakers tonight, so I'll warn you in advance of that. Right, let's start. Apologies for absence and substitutes. Kimberly.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from councillors Anna James and Stephen Mulliner. There are no substitutes to call upon.
Okay, thank you very much. Minutes of the last meeting. The minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 20th of April, have been published on the council's website. And are these correct records of the meetings? Thank you very much. Declarations of interest, Kimberly.
No declarations submitted prior to the meeting, Chair.
Thank you.
None received, Chair. None received, Chair.
Any relevant legislation as a government guidance or guidance since last meeting, Beth?
Nothing of any relevance to the items before members this evening, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right, let's move on to the meat of tonight's agenda, which starts with the first one is WA 2021-01663, land to the Reeds, the erection of an ancillary building, and the officer is Dan Holmes. Dan, to present.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Okay, the application has been brought before the Planning Committee at the request of the late ward member, the late ward councillor Brian Adams, who wished for further consideration to be given to the erection of an ancillary outbuilding that has already been constructed. The ward member requests further consideration to be given to the impact on visual amenity, specifically whether the outbuilding results in overdevelopment of the site. Officers consider that the proposal is acceptable with regards to the impact on the greenbelt, landscape character, residential amenity, parking and access, trees and biodiversity. The planning balance assessment concludes that the proposal is in accordance with the development plan. As such, planning permission is recommended for approval. The history to the site is complex, and permission was previously approved for extensions and alterations to the residential dwelling under WA 2019-1879. The applicant proceeded to build the extensions which were not in accordance with the plans, and as such, an application was submitted to regularise the development as built. This application, WA 2021-01664, was refused owing to the harmful impact on the greenbelt. Two further applications were submitted simultaneously, with both already constructed. A second application, WA 2021-01616, concerned the alterations to an access track and parking area. This was heard at Western Committee in March 2022 and refused owing to the harmful impact on character and residential amenity. The item being heard here today is the third of three applications at the site, the erection of an ancillary outbuilding following demolition of existing outbuildings. This outbuilding has already been constructed. It is noted that the two previously refused items have no impact on what is being considered today. This application therefore seeks planning permission retrospectively, and members are reminded that whilst it is regrettable that the landowner sought to undertake these works without first securing planning permission, no planning offence has been committed. Your assessment of the proposal this evening should be no different to an assessment of works not yet undertaken. In other words, your assessment must remain focused on planning merit alone. So this is the location plan, and the application site is rural and agricultural in nature, with 2 attached cottages, 2 other residential dwellings and commercial stables within the vicinity. The application site lies to the south of the Reeds Road, and the main dwelling is set approximately 100 metres back from the main highway. This is the aerial view, and the proposed outbuilding has been constructed in the southwestern corner. The outbuildings proposed to be demolished are identifiable in the southern part of the aerial photo on the right-hand side of this slide. A further aerial here shows the two outbuildings to be removed. The blue arrow shows the position of the metal shed, and the red arrow shows the position of a polytunnel. This aerial photo was taken from the council's own mapping software StatMap from 1999, and as such, the lawful buildings of permanence. This is the site plan, and I've just annotated it because it's quite hard to discern various parts of the plan there. So the red arrow shows the two outbuildings to be removed. The polytunnel to the south and a metal shed to the east. The ancillary outbuilding proposed is to the north of the polytunnel and is shown by the blue arrow, and the main dwelling by the green arrow. Officers note that the lawful frontage of the main dwelling would be to the southeast. The outbuilding would be positioned approximately 24 metres from the main dwelling off the southwestern flank. Therefore, as the location is within the AONB, there would be no permitted development fallback within this location. However, there would be a fallback to the northwest, the lawful rear elevation of the site, immediately adjacent to the rear amenity space of number 1, the Reeds. As such, the location proposed would have less of an impact on the residential amenities of neighbouring residents. Now some site photos. So this photo shows the proposed outbuilding already constructed in black timber cladding, and you can see the polytunnel to be demolished immediately adjacent to the outbuilding. And I draw your attention to the secluded position of the outbuilding, which is only partially visible from the access track to the southeast. It's fairly typical for an ancillary outbuilding and does not appear out of character. Photograph B, this shows the views looking south into the site, showing the outbuilding within the curtilage. You can just identify it in the centre of the photo there. And then photograph C and D. C looks northwest towards the adjoining paddock area, and photograph D looks southwest and shows the metal shed and polytunnel both proposed to be removed. So the elevations and floor plans. This just shows the elevations of the outbuilding. The roof would be approximately 3.1 metres in height, 4.25 metres in depth, 4.17 metres in width, and would comprise of black timber cladding, fairly typical for an outbuilding. So the main matters for consideration this evening are the green belt. The erection of a new ancillary outbuilding would not fall under any of the categories under paragraphs 149 and 150 of the NPPF. However, the decrease in overall floor area as a result of the removal of the two outbuildings that have existed in excess of 23 years, and therefore the overall spread of built form, the openness of the greenbelt would be improved over the existing situation. And this would be subject to a condition requiring the removal of these outbuildings within 3 months, the decision being issued. And in light of this, officers consider that the proposed development would not be materially larger than that to be replaced, and there would be no significant harm to the openness of the greenbelt. As such, the proposal would not have a greater impact on openness, and very special circumstances would outweigh the harm. In terms of character, the design would be sympathetic to local form, and the dwelling would be well separated and the building would be well separated from surrounding dwellings. Officers identify no harmful impact on the street scene, the AONB or the AGLV. And I just want to note regarding Tilford Parish Council's objection on the basis of overdevelopment of the site, they also requested that if minded to approve, the outbuilding be ancillary, and this is met through condition 3, which is listed within the officer report. In terms of residential amenity, it's single story and would not be overbearing, well separated from surrounding residential dwellings and would not result in any loss of light, harmful loss of privacy or outlook to neighbouring properties. Biodiversity, a preliminary ecological appraisal and preliminary route assessment survey was submitted as part of the application by Arbtech, and the application site was visited and reviewed by Surrey Wildlife Trust. And the trust advised that if minded to approve, an ecological enhancement plan for the site be submitted as a planning condition, and subject to compliance with these, the proposed outbuilding would have an acceptable impact on biodiversity. And for the reasons outlined within this presentation and within the report, the proposed ancillary outbuilding would be acceptable for the reasons set out in the report and mentioned above, and the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have 4 public speakers on this item. This one being a Mr. Colin Shern, who wishes to object to the application. He's online, is he? Good evening, Mr. Shern. You have 4 minutes. 4 minutes from now, from when you start speaking, to present your case.
You're on mute, Mr. Shern.
Sorry, you would have thought I would have got used to this after COVID. The applicants built the ancillary building without planning consent as a gym and office in 2020. It has insulation, double glazing and sanitary services connected to a septic tank. There was no building there before. It was an area that had crazy paving and a rotary dryer. And the applicants claim the building isn't near trees, but as was seen from the photographs, it's underneath trees within the root protection area. They also claim that trees have no ecological value in that location, which is incorrect. All this can be seen on the plans and photographs, and we've submitted photographs of the before the building was built to the council. I disagree with the planning officer about the ancillary building. The ancillary building is ancillary to the house. A retrospective application for the extension was refused by planners in February 22 because of its scale. That application had an increased RD2 floor area of 54%. This ancillary building increases it further to 73%. The applicant suggests that the removal of a polytunnel and earth-floored corrugated metal shed justify the increase in area, but a polytunnel is not comparable to a permanent structure that will be used for domestic purposes, such as a gym and office. There is also nothing to stop the applicants replacing the polytunnel and shed under permitted development rights at some time in the future. The area is Greenbelt AONB AGLV. The planning officer quotes the MPPF that buildings are not allowed in the Greenbelt unless there are exceptional circumstances, and states, as such, the presence of development is harmful by definition, and very special circumstances are therefore required in this case to outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt and any other harm. The officer also concludes the building breaches local plan RE2 and RE3. The planning officer goes on to suggest policies TD1, D1 and D2 of the local plan provide exceptions to the national planning policy, but none of the defined exceptions, allowable exceptions within MPPF 149 and 150 apply in this case, so there is no justification for it. Local plan D1C also states there should be no loss of general amenity, including material loss of privacy enjoyed by neighbours and disturbance resulting from the emission of noise, light and vibration. The officer's report only considers loss of visual amenity and concludes the building is hidden from view from our house at Reeds Wood by a 1.7 metre high fence and trees. This is incorrect. The fence is 1.2 metres high and the 4 metre Lalande hedge in the applicant's property cannot be relied upon to provide privacy and can be reduced in height or removed at any time. The building is also right next to our property. It may be 24 metres away from the applicant's property, but it's less than 6 metres from our fence line and our house. The ancillary building has been built nearer Reeds Wood than the applicant's house. And when the building was used as an office and gym, music was frequently played, which is disruptive to us as it's a very quiet rural area. Noise disturbance wasn't considered in the officer's report. There's already a stable in the applicant's field. It's about the same size as the ancillary building. Should the applicant need space to increase the ancillary space in the building, in the house, this could and still can be converted rather than building a new one that currently doesn't have consent.
15
I
seconds.
urge councillors to refuse this retrospective development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, the next speaker we have is a James Deverell. It's James. You have 4 minutes too.
Hi. So planning consent was granted for extensions and alterations to the house in 2020. And there was then the pandemic, and the applicants made the unfortunate decision that they didn't realize that planning consent was required. They built this shed to house materials for secure storage. That's happened. They apologize for that. Since the situation is now, they'd like to retain this building, and to assist with that, we'll remove the polytunnel and the metal shed, which will mean that there's a decrease in built form, and therefore there'll be an increase in the openness of the green belt. So the choice really before you today is whether you accept that there's very special circumstances which show that there'll be less harm on the green belt as a result of keeping this building and demolishing the other buildings, or whether you refuse the shed and then there's a greater amount of built form left on the site. So, I mean, as the planning officer said, it doesn't fall within any exceptions for greenbelt development, so it's purely assessed on very special circumstances. And we believe that the circumstance that there'll be an improvement to the openness of the greenbelt should hopefully be enough to demonstrate that it's a better form of development than what would be there if the building's removed and the old ancillary buildings are retained. It's worth noting that the building was erected on an existing area of hard standing, so there would have been no, and it's a simple off the peg building, which you then just place on the existing slab, so there would have been no harm to the trees nearby. We've had all the biodiversity reports. It was just an area of hard standing, so there's very little opportunity therefore for protected species to be using that area of hard standing. It's well screened, as the photographs show. It's in a there's a window at the front, but it looks towards the house, so there's only overlooking between the house and the ancillary building. And it's also it's a modest scale. It relates well to the house, and it's not a big two-story building that could be dominant against the boundary with the neighbour. So for these reasons, I hope you allow this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, the next one speaker is Deborah Lee from Tilford Parish Council. Deborah, you've got 4 minutes too.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Lee. I'm Chair of Tilford Parish Council. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. Tilford discussed this application last year, and we did unanimously vote to object it. And I must say that it's quite rare that an ancillary building elicits such a response. But in this case, we do unfortunately feel that our objection was justified. It's difficult not to see the context of harm across the site in this valuable area of multiple designations, with the recently refused extension and the damage to the woodland from the driveway, and obviously this being a retrospective application already built. But for us, we just saw it as Additionally to everything else, it's yet another built form in in the valuable landscape. We did also note some inaccuracies. I think it's already been mentioned, and I'm sure you recognise it already, but it's worth mentioning that it is actually close to ancient and semi-natural woodland, which is incorrect in the report. So I think it just needs to be noted. It's really quite close. It's just the other side. So therefore, we just can't see those special circumstances. We're a bit confused by that from what our understanding is very special circumstances. We just can't see this. And so we question how an application like this could be approved against policy, particularly as we know that in the application, it does state that if the application is refused, they're just going to move it. And so we're just not sure that that's a solution either. We do try and apply consistency in all the comments that we make. And this isn't the first time that we've voted against a new building in Greenbelt, and we like to be consistent in that way. But for us, we can't overlook the excessive size. And it is significantly larger than many of the home offices we've been asked to review. And we've been asked to review a fair few over COVID, as I'm sure you all have. And it's much bigger. Had it been small and compliant with other policies, I'm not sure we would have even commented on it. But to us, there is clear harm, and it's difficult to fathom the claims of reduction of the built form on this site, because it clearly is a very built form, and sadly we believe that it's compounding damage to this environment. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. And the fourth public speaker is the Ward Councillor, Councillor Julia Potts. Julia, you have 4 minutes now, and of course you have the right for another 4 minutes at the end of the debate. Julia.
Councillor Beeman and members of the committee, members of the public, thank you very much for your time this evening. Like the late Councillor Adams, I too had a number of concerns about this of one of many retrospective applications at this particular site in Greenbelt, AGLV, AONB. A lot of what I was going to say has already been said, and I won't repeat that. But I think it's really important that members of the committee look to a few key parts of their report. And if I may draw committee's attention again to page 9 and the paragraphs there that talk about exceptional circumstance and allowable exceptions 149 and 150, which have already been mentioned. Those are crucial, and I trust that you will bear those in mind and review those very carefully as you consider this application. It is very clear, again, we come to page 12 of your report, committee members, and again, paragraph 3 of page 12 actually highlights very clearly to you the proximity to the deciduous woodland, and again that's of real concern and potential ecological harm there. But of course the true effect, no matter how much the applicant's agent talks about plans and ecological surveys, can't really be measured in so much of this, because we are looking, as we have in so many times before at this site, at a retrospective application. So the facts are that we don't really know what has or hasn't happened. I would also like to just highlight some comments that were made and make a few corrections here. For a building of that size, materials had to be laid. Concrete, cement had to be poured. There was and may well have been crazy paving there in the past, but it's clear that that whole area was disturbed. Groundworks did take place, and again, this will have caused damage to a very, very sensitive habitat. So I'm afraid I do take issue with some of the comments made by the applicant's agent, and I have real concerns that, again, we don't know what we don't know. And the facts are, this is retrospective, everything is after the event. So we don't have the full correct facts before us as a result of that. And just to sum up, I think we are all in agreement. It's very clear from the officers' report, and I think the officers should be acknowledged and thanked for their work, but they're also in a very hard and difficult position here because this is a retrospective application, that given the sensitivities, and it is an on-balance judgment, we should not, and I would urge the committee not to allow this application before them tonight. I really feel that it should be refused, and I would urge the committee to very carefully study the report before them. There are no exceptional or special circumstance, and in conjunction and in agreement with everything being said by neighbours, but also by the parish council who know this site well, I would urge its refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Of course, you have the right to another 4 minutes after the end of the debate, if you so wish.
Thank you very much, Councillor Beaman.
Right, councillors, your turn. Who wishes to start? Anybody? Oh, yes. Councillor Coburn.
Can't see a chairman struggle like that. It's difficult, isn't it, this one? I think my problem with this is the security for the future, because we have been told that we can condition certainly the demolition of the other buildings. How much control do we actually have into the future that they can't be replaced? And there is absolutely no question, you only have to drive past this site to take Councillor Lee's point that the changes have been major on this site, not necessarily because of this particular shed that we're looking at tonight, but it is cumulative. And I found the drawings quite difficult just to get the sort of proportions rather than the sighting of it. We are seeing more and more of these buildings, and we are saying they must remain ancillary to the main dwelling. And again, looking into the future, I'm not sure how firm that can be, firmly that can be conditioned. So I'd like some help on that one. You know, I'm tempted to say we should just start again with this one. Look at this site as a whole, because if we just let these small bits through and then further down the line, the demolition doesn't happen, even if it's conditioned, and then further down the line from that, we then have a situation where under permitted development, they can replace the building on the original hard standing. I just have so much doubt about where this is going. I think that's my big problem with this one. And, you know, there is, including with what's there and this shed, a lot of development on that site that I would not have thought was acceptable under the MPPF. So I have to say, interesting to hear what other people say, but I'm not sure that I can just wave this one through. I just feel there are far too many questions in terms of how firmly we could condition its use and condition the future of this site that I'm very wary at the moment. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Devlin, you want to comment on that, Barry? Yes, Councillor Coburn.
With respect, what I was talking about was the force of conditions and the future. That's what I was trying to get at, not the special circumstances. I've made my mind up about that. It's the, you know, what we are opening ourselves up to by thinking that we can condition something that actually in the long term we can't, you know, impose that condition. That's my problem with this one. Where are we going in the long term on this side?
Yes, of course, Mr. Chairman, any conditions imposed would have to satisfy the normal tests of precision, enforceability, reasonableness, etc.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I understand the question. So from what I've been listening to, you are concerned about going forward into the future, how we can retain control over a structure that is conditioned to be ancillary, and any rights that may exist for them to simply re-erect buildings in their place. So if I start with the ancillary condition and the condition to remove those 2 outbuildings, they are reasonable. They pass the 6 tests within the MPPF as far as officers are concerned. They are perfectly enforceable, and they would remain in place. Clearly, it relies on, at the moment, the enforcement function of planning relies on complaints. So we would have to have a complaint to investigate that ancillary use. But those conditions, as far as we're concerned, are fit for purpose. In terms of your concerns regarding a condition that would require them to remove those outbuildings, but then re-erect under PD rights, that because it's in the AONB, they cannot build under PD rights between the side and the boundary of the house. And they can't build to the rear, they cannot erect structures over 10 square meters outside of a 20-meter arc from the rear elevation of the house. Now, I accept that the rear elevation of the house is it's up for debate in a general sense, but in the sense of PD goes back to the original dwelling. So the original dwelling had its front elevation, principal elevation, facing southeast along the reeds. The rear elevation is the northwest, where the track comes down the new front. So they would have PD rights that they could exercise within the rear garden, as long as it was within 20 meters to the main dwelling. So I think that is important, because there is, I think, a benefit to this location in terms of its screening, its minimal impact on neighbouring amenity by way of loss of light, overbearing form, or loss of privacy. And of course, if we do have complaints, we will investigate them. In terms of your concern about, is it going to be truly ancillary going into the future? It's the green belt. Fundamentally, if there was an activity that subdivided a planning unit, we would have serious concerns about that. So in answer to your question in a very long-winded way, and I apologise, I personally believe those conditions are fit for purpose, and they would achieve the outcome that officers think is acceptable. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right. Councillor Keane and Councillor Dear. Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I just need it to be cleared up what this shed is going to be used for, to be honest with you, because we heard the gentleman who spoke first saying that it was used as a gym and there was loud music coming from it. And then we heard the agent saying it was going to be used as a storage unit. And we're told that it's going to be sort of hooked up to a water supply or something. And I'm a bit concerned as to what exactly is going on here, because I personally don't like retrospective planning applications anyway. But if somebody could make it clear to me what exactly this is going to be used for, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
I think it was said initially it was being used for storage, wasn't it? I think that's what you said. Dan?
Thank you, Chair. The application is for ancillary usage. That can include a number of things. It can include usage as a home gym. It could be home office. It could be storage. That's all I have to say.
I think the point is it was used initially. I understand it. Jim, right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I may be unique in this committee in that I've actually been here and I've actually looked at this. I was on an officer-led trip to the site. Unfortunately, I don't think any other members were able to attend, so it was just the three of us. And that was to look at the driveway and the other things. And there's obviously a long history of persistent and gross contempt of the planning process by this applicant. But as has been stated, that's not something we can take into account tonight because we consider each application on its merits. I think the site visit, it was mentioned that that there would be a net gain as a result of the demolition of the existing buildings, and that this would be sort of difficult to refuse. The thing that concerns me has just been touched on by Councillor Keane, though, actually, because when I went in there and looked in the window, it was full of gym stuff. It was full of, equipment. And to my mind, that smacks of extending the residential nature, extending the use of the house further away from the house toward a new neighbour. Now, it may well be that there are no technical, matters about rights of light or any of the other things that come up as in locations that are more densely packed than this. But the reservation I have is that it, as I say, it extends, it moves towards a neighbour, the activities that would normally be carried out in a house, to wit, one gym or an office or whatever it is. So I'm inclined, on balance, I think, to probably say no to this for that reason, that I think the impact on the adjoining owner is likely to be more than simply a loss of light or a bit of overlooking or anything like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rubini.
Thank you, Chairman. I too, like many others, don't like retrospective planning applications. I prefer to look at it in the raw so that we can decide immediately what we can do without having to think about any demolitions or anything else if we refuse it. The problem I have here is I do wonder that they put this building on. Why didn't they take the two buildings that are there down at the time? If they were confident this was going through, then why not do it at the time? Why wait until we decide whether we're going to allow it or not? They've obviously not got the confidence, and I don't think I've got the confidence either. I think I agree with the other councillors spoken that have said that this is in the green belt. Do we allow it or not? We've got to do it on its own merits. I'm of the opinion personally that this does not look right in its present location. And I personally would think about refusing this. Thank you.
Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chairman. It's my understanding that retrospective approval would be if a planning application was made in the first place. Retrospective is essentially trying to avoid absurdity. It is not trying to evade the planning regulations. I've got a serious concern for this development. I cannot see how it is sustainable in terms of social, environmental, or economic terms. I also cannot see how it is compatible with Local Plan 2002, Policy D1 and Policy D4. Therefore, there is no way that I could support this application. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have to agree with others that have said that, whilst we're not, as I understand, supposed to be evaluating it or taking into the fact that it's retrospective in the sort of decision process, it begs the question that, why they've gone through this approach, having, obviously been through the sort of planning process a number of times before, and therefore, presumably aware to some degree of what that process involves. I think part of the issue that I have is that in terms of the very special circumstances, it seems as though a very special circumstance is that there's the permitted development fallback to relocate the existing outbuilding if refused, which doesn't seem to me to be a particularly very special circumstance, if you like. It does beg the question that, having been through the sort of planning process or been involved in various planning processes before, why they didn't just build it within that sort of first 20 meters of permitted development in the first place. And then that might be making life more easy for themselves. But I think the other question is that others have mentioned is why in constructing the building, why haven't the existing buildings been removed already? I mean, that is something that does spring to mind and seems a little unusual, because in part of the argument, I think they say that the overall built form will reduce. Well, it will reduce if they remove it, but why did they not remove it before they built the new building? So I think I would struggle to support at this stage. Thank you.
Any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillor, did your office wish to make any comments? No. Councillor Potts, you've got a final 4 minutes if you so wish.
Chairman, I actually have very little to add to what has been spoken by most members of the committee. I think they've clearly listened very carefully to all of us who've spoken already, including the parish council, and understand the raft of concerns we have about this site and this application, the precedent it could set, and the fact that there are no special circumstances, and everything that it brings with it. And as I say, all I would ask is that members, thank you for your time, and that I sincerely hope that when this does go to the vote, it will be refused this evening. Thank you.
Well, we do come to that point. The recommendation is that subject to conditions 1 to 5, and informative permission be granted. Those in favour, please raise their hands, please. Against? Abstain? One, two. Good result, Kimberly.
Thank you, Chairman. So that is none against, everybody else but one. Sorry, none in favour, everyone against, apart from one who's abstained. Was there 2 abstentions? Who else abstained? Oh, sorry, Councillor Hess, I missed you. I apologise. And 2 abstentions, I apologise.
Okay, we need an alternative recommendation, please.
Permission be refused.
Officers, I think you get the gist there.
Thank you, Chairman. What I've heard this evening, I would, the main theme that's been coming out is that this is an inappropriate development for which no very special circumstances exist to clearly outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt by way of inappropriate development. I would caution members against residential amenity reasons. It is entirely within your gift to refuse on those grounds, but I would remind you that this is garden, and any activity can take place in open garden, loud music, etc. And there are other controls in other legislation available to control that sort of issue. Thank you, Chairman.
We've got a form of words. Sorry.
No, sorry, it's nothing helpful. It's really a question. Is there any phraseology we can use? I mean, we were told basically, if this stays, the others will go. It's the sort of sequencing of all of this that has worried me, apart from anything else, that the applicant hasn't shown any willingness to lessen the built form on the site by actually knocking anything down. And I don't know if there's any planning reason or any terminology we can get, but that is, as it stands with the stuff that's already on there, I think it's overdevelopment of the Greenbelt as it stands, but we keep being told, but they're going to remove that and therefore there's net gain. It's very nebulous, to say the least.
Beth or Dan?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Coburn. I just wanted to say on that matter that the application is for the removal of those 2 outbuildings. So in terms of overdevelopment of the site, I would probably steer away from that on that matter, because we would be assessing on what is proposed, and that is the removal of those outbuildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it not? I mean, from my perspective, it doesn't seem to meet the criteria that would set it as not inappropriate development, that would make it appropriate development in terms of the criteria that's laid out on page 9. And the very special circumstance of it, of the fallback of them basically putting it closer to the house, doesn't seem to me to be enough of a very special circumstance to outweigh the fact that the building is new, regardless of whether others are going to be taken down. It doesn't meet the criteria that's listed in those bullets on page 9.
Councillor Edmonds, have got anything?
Yeah, yes, I'm quoting from page 13. As such, it would not constitute inappropriate. Oh, right. I'm saying it would be inappropriate.
And Councillor Bishop, do you want to add anything?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, one thing we seem to have forgotten is neighbours' amenity. Obviously, from what the neighbour said, it's quite disturbing for him, and that the fence, hedge, or whatever it isn't nearly as high as was claimed. So that's something I think we should seriously add. Thank you.
Have we got any words now? Or do you want to add?
Just I think the officer was very clear on the guidance she gave us about residential amenity just now, and I take that point entirely. If it hasn't been, the motion hasn't been seconded, I'd be very happy to do so. But I think we would be well advised to rely on the appropriateness of the development in the green belt. That seems to me the sort of bedrock of the reason for refusal that I've heard discussed here tonight. Thanks.
I've got some words. Oh, okay.
Thank you, Chair. So we have concluded the proposal would result in inappropriate development that would conflict with national, strategic and local planning policies regarding greenbelt set out in policy RE2 of the Local Plan Part 1 2018 and retain policy RD2 of the Waverley Local Plan 2002. There is a general presumption against inappropriate development and development which adversely affects the openness of the greenbelt. The proposed development does not comply with the requirements of these policies, and no very special circumstances exist that outweigh the harm. Clearly outweigh the harm.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Coburn and Councillor Deere? Right. Shall we vote? Right. Those in favour? Against? Kimberly, the result, please.
That's 10 in favour of refusal, none against and 1 abstention.
Right, then the application is reviewed on those grounds. Let's move on. Thank you. Right, next application is WA 2020-2062, the land at Edgecombe, 10 Hill Road, Hazelmere. The erection of a dwelling together with formation of new vehicle access off Hill Road and associated works was amended by drawing and received on the 5th of April. The officer is James Kidger. James, present please.
Thank you, Chairman.
To the slideshow option. Let's go forward,
yeah. No, the rest.
So Kevin, we've just got to get
Guess what? There's a technical glitch.
yes, that one.
Yeah, apologies, Chairman. Land at Edgecombe, This is for the erection of a dwelling and formation of new vehicular access off Hill Road. Here we have the location plan, the site on the right-hand side edged red, and the remainder of the current Edgecombe plot edged blue on the left. This is an aerial photograph, probably from 2021, showing the site as it appeared. So in the centre there, you have Edgecombe and the wide garden area, College Hill on the right, Hill Road toward the bottom. And some photographs now of the Hill Road frontage. On the left-hand side, Edgecombe, the dwelling, the existing dwelling, and then the hedge running down the frontage of the remainder of the plot. Another shot looking toward, again, Edgecombe on the left-hand side and what would be the new plot on the right. This from the corner of Hill Road and College Hill, showing the vegetation currently in situ and which would be retained. Edgecombe, the existing dwelling on the left-hand side again. This one from College Hill looking south toward the application site, showing some of the vegetation which would be retained on the boundaries. This is within the site looking north, sort of looking at the area of ground where the proposed dwelling would approximately be sited. This is stood in the same place looking west. You've got the neighbouring dwelling at Hollydean on the right hand side there, and the Edgecombe dwelling is just out of shot on the left. You can see the stairs leading up to it on the left hand side. This is looking south, so back toward Hill Road from the site, and the existing dwelling at Edgecombe on the right hand side. And this one looking east toward what would be behind that hedge, College Hill. This is the proposed block plan, contemporary design of dwelling, flat roofs, green roofs, in fact. This is a previously approved dwelling on the same site, and that permission is still extant. This is the basement plan proposed. They've got the bedrooms on the basement, and then the ground floor with a terrace at the rear. First floor, the sort of grey block at the left-hand side is a wall which would significantly impede the view from the terrace. And that element of the scheme has been amended in the course of the application. And some elevations. The south elevation at the top is what would face Hill Road to the south. The east elevation at the bottom. And then we've got the north elevation, which shows the extent of the glazing and just the general layout. So you've got the main terrace in the middle, and there's a reduced upper terrace. And it is set into the hill, so it looks quite substantial from the rear, but it's effectively the lower story is a basement level. And then the west elevation at the bottom, showing a green wall which would face the Edgecombe plot. And some proposed street scenes. The one at the top is from Hill Road and shows the relatively low profile of the proposed dwelling. So it's set into the hill. If you compare that with the three-story view on the previous slide, you can see how much the hill affects the elevations and the general profile. The street scene on the bottom is from the west, I believe, the side road, Half Moon something, sorry. And then we have final street scene from College Hill on the east side, showing the dwelling in the foreground and the Edgecombe dwelling in the background, the existing dwelling. And then this is a section from the rear of the existing Edgecombe dwelling on the right and the proposed dwelling on the left, and just shows some of the levels involved. And that perhaps more clearly demonstrates how the proposed dwelling will be set into the hill. Its first floor, so you can see just the elements of the first floor behind the greenery, would actually be set lower than the equivalent first floor on the Edgecombe property to the right. So the key issues with this one, the contemporary design, the impact to the character of the area, any impact to amenities and neighbours, potentially from overlooking, and the lack of 5-year housing land supply, so the tilted balance would apply. If the committee is minded to refuse, they would need to be content that the reasons for doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We have two public speakers on this item. The first one being a Mr. Robert Beattie. Is he online or? He's on Zoom. He's online. Mr. Beattie, you have 4 minutes from when you start.
Apologies, Mr. Chairman. I think you've got me on the wrong one here. I'm here to comment on Santis, which is the third application.
I do apologise. I got one public speaker on this item, which is in fact Councillor Molyneux, who's speaking as a ward councillor. Councillor Molyneux, you have 4 minutes now, and of course 4 minutes after.
This application goes back to 2020, and I felt it should be called in because of the substantial contrast between the design proposed and the general style of the area. If you stand on Hill Road looking at Edgecombe on the left and the site of the proposed building on the right, and you turn around through 360 degrees, every single house has gables. And it seemed to me that it was appropriate for this committee to decide whether it was comfortable with that. I noted the comments about the Hazelmere Neighbourhood Plan and the Hazelmere Design Statement, and they quite rightly accept that contemporary design can be appropriate. And I have no personal objection to contemporary design in the right place, particularly in what you might call a mixed street scene. If you have a variety of styles in one particular road, it really doesn't do very much harm to add yet another. As I say, the Hill Road, College Hill and Half Moon Hill complex is a little different, very different. It is uniformly gables of various heights and sizes, mainly substantial. And the previous application, which the precursor to this committee approved, is for a fairly standard design, which would fit that. So my feeling is that although we have moved on in the sense of the 5-year housing land supply having deteriorated, so the test that would have to be met is somewhat more substantial. I really put it before the committee that the change of style is so significant, and although it's not hugely apparent to the street scene, it will still be perfectly visible, and it will, I think, in many views, stick out like the proverbial sore thumb. And that is why I am personally unhappy about it, but I'm not voting tonight. I'm just exercising my right as the ward councillor to explain why I called it into committee, and to register the fact that I still have doubts whether this particular design is really appropriate for that particular location. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. You have another 4 minutes after the debate. Can I just consult with Right, okay. Councillors, debate, anyone start this debate? No. Is it sorry?
I am registered to speak.
Sorry? This is very confusing. The committee allow this rather bizarre situation. Yes, of course. I do apologise. I mean, right, Michael, you have 4 minutes.
Forgive me, is anyone speaking?
Oh. Apologies, Councillor Mulliner, he hadn't put his microphone on.
Did everyone hear up to that point? So
No, I heard nothing.
okay, so shall I just continue from? Okay, thank you. Okay, the plot itself, due to the extensive hedges, trees and twisting roads in the area, is barely discernible to standing directly in front of it. The house would essentially be invisible due to 30-foot high hedges along College Hill, its design which sinks it into the hillside, and additional proposed hedges and trees on the hill roadside. 400 metres directly west along Hill Road is 15A Courts Hill Road, another highly contemporary flat roof property approved and built in the Hazelmere Conservation Area. This proposed plot is not in the conservation area. This is a large single house on a quarter-acre plot in an area of primarily large single houses on similar sized plots. We've included a consultant report on the character of the area and whether this property would fit into it, which concluded that the proposals accord with the various measured criteria tests for assessing the existing character features of the locality. Initially, we received few objections and several letters of support, including from the most immediate neighbour. Only when it was posted on social media did additional comments come in, with some households submitting as many as 5 letters. As some of these objections weren't even from the same town, it is unclear how they would be affected. At the Hazelmere Town Council meeting, you'll note that they chose to not object and even stated in their meeting minutes that the design was, and I quote, more appropriate for the area. I'm aware of comments made by Councillor Rubini and Keane at this meeting where they stated that ideally contemporary homes would not be allowed to be built anywhere, in response to a comment made by the late Councillor Isherwood, who remarked that if you can't build a contemporary house on this plot, where can you? I understand that design preferences vary from person to person, but that is subjective.
Please. Can you conclude?
Oh, I think it went from 2 minutes suddenly to 1 minute when I started. The office report is clear about Hazelmere's and the national design policy for high quality contemporary houses. They explicitly state that they welcome them and believe they add interest and intrigue to the street scene. Having worked productively and proactively with Waverley planning over the past 18 months, making every amendment asked of me, I believe is in the public interest that this application receives a fair and objective vote based on planning policy, not by a predetermined decision based on personal design preferences. This is an area I grew up in. I even attended the nursery school on College Hill as a child. I'm here today with a strong officer's recommendation for approval, and I'm asking for the councillors here to allow this recommendation to stand so I can begin building my family home. Thank you.
I do apologise for the...
No problem at all.
Yes, yes. Right, councillors. Dear, of course.
Hello again, Mr. Chairman. Beg your pardon, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I wasn't at the Hazelmere Town Council meeting. I don't think they discussed this because I haven't seen this before. I am all in favour of elegantly designed modern stuff in any area, really. It adds a freshness and a colour and a vitality to a street scene, in my view. Having said that, I would find it a lot easier to go along with this if there was at least some element of I could identify with in the local street scene. Now, we're clearly not talking about the principle of development here. That's been established by the previous consent. It's what it looks like. We have policies on which we can rely to defend the external appearance of buildings. And I really want to like this. But I have to say I'm really struggling. Modern design doesn't mean simply angular design. Modern design doesn't mean, I won't use the word brutal, but confrontational in the context of a sloping site like this. I mean, I'm going to listen to what other members say, but I'm sort of coming to the conclusion that I regretfully think that it's not something I would be able to support in its present form, although I would love someone to come back with a more elegant design that is modern, but maybe reflects the use of neighborhood materials more, if you like. But as I say, I'm going to, before I decide, I'm going to listen to what everyone else has got to say. Thank you.
All right. Well, next one is Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. The main thing that sort of strikes me, as Councillor Deere said, is the design. I'm not sure to what extent, clearly opinions on design are subjective, and you know, one person might think it's beautiful, another might not. I mean, in my view, I mean, I'm not sure whether there's any criteria that would allow us to really decline it on the basis of it not being similar to the other houses in the area. You know, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but in my view, I really like it. I think it's a great design. I think it is contemporary. You know, I really like contemporary design, and fortunately or unfortunately, things change and things progress. And it seems to me that in terms of the land that they have available and the design of the house and where they've placed the living room versus the bedrooms, which are cut into the, you know, seem to be cut into the hillside. I think it's a modern design, and they've tried to make it fairly, you know, they've tried to use the available land in such a way that it isn't too prominent in terms of the size of the house that they want to build. And it seems, I think another point that was in the pack was is actually slightly smaller, I think, than the previous design that was put in place. So, I mean, personally, I really like it, and you know, I can't see anything wrong with it being different or visible if it's attractive. And to me, it is attractive. But you know, clearly that's subjective to the point of view of the person looking at it. But for me, I would be happy to approve it in my vote.
Thank you very much, Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to say things very similar to what Councillor Hunt has just said. I think we should be open to mixing in contemporary designs with the existing housing stock. Obviously, the existing housing stock here is of a traditional, you know, era, particular point in time, and we need to, you know, allow new things to happen. So, in principle, I am for that. I don't find it unappealing in look. It's very angular, very squarish. But that's what the applicant has designed, and you can see why. It's a very sustainable design, which is something to applaud. Green roof, as he says, technically advanced. So I would support this because I think we should allow a mixture of the new with the existing. Thank you.
Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you very much. I've got two questions and two concerns. The first question is, have we got all the recommended conditions of the Highways Authority in the document? And the second question is, what recommended conditions of Thames Water imposed? My concerns are related to the design. There's potential for light pollution. There seems to be a lot of glass in the building. That would concern me in terms of sustainability. And then the damage to the hedges, I'm not sure whether we have got assurance that the hedges would not be damaged. Thank you, Chair.
Those questions, James? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the conditions recommended by the Highway Authority and by Thames Water are listed. Start at condition 9. Which relates to the strategic water main. Condition 10 relates to, it prohibits piling within a distance of the water main unless and until further details are provided. They were the two conditions recommended by Thames Water. And then following on from that, we've got conditions 11, 12, and 13 were all recommended by the Highway Authority.
Thank you. So we have all the conditions there.
We do,
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I've heard what colleagues have said. The Hazelmere Hillsides area is a very special area. And however, allowing a new contemporary design in the right way is no bad thing. And it's stated here that there'd be no significant harm to the immunity of neighbours. And I note that Hazelmere Town Council have no objection. So those are all very positive elements to this application. Where I really take issue, and I mark everybody's cards here, to approve this based on these drawings, you are on a wing and a prayer, because although it's perfectly permissible within planning law to submit drawings like this, nothing wrong, but they do not indicate in any way what will actually be built on that site. You can't get an appreciation for what you will look at in 2 or 3 years' time when this is built, what those elevations will look like, the fenestration, the elevational details, what that stonework is. Is it flint? Is it stone? You know, what is it? You can't tell. These drawings don't indicate really what you're going to land up with in that road on that site. But having said that, we are where we are. They're perfectly entitled to submit drawings like this. They're not really indicative of what we'll see. So on that basis, I'm going to abstain, because although I think it's probably a good house on a good location that will nestle in, I don't know what it'll look like. So I can't throw my support behind that. So I'm abstaining. Thank you.
Councillor Coburn?
And I have to say, I mean, up front, I don't like it, but that wouldn't stop me voting for it, you'd be glad to know. I do understand that we've got the word beauty in the MPPF now, but it is in the eye of the beholder. And Councillor Blishen and I have something very similar to this in the Bourne, which was heralded when it came through planning as a wonderful new design, and it was going to have wonderful construction. And when it came to the build, it wasn't built anything like according to plan because of all the difficulties of doing. And it is so similar to this one that, you know, I was sort of shaking reading it. Oh my goodness, you know, we're here again. But actually my objection to this one, working on the assumption they don't make the same mistakes as the awful thing in the Bourne, is that it doesn't add anything to the street scene. This was my problem with it. We've got another very modern one, which again is in my area in the Bourne, and where it is, it adds to it because the road itself has all different levels, and because the view across doesn't affect anybody, you know, with whatever the lighting. And you know, you look at it and you think, gosh, that's really lovely, you know, totally different from the house next door. My problem with this is that it is really very big on the site, isn't it? You know, when you look at the position, you haven't got a huge amount of space around it. It really does, there's one picture in particular where it really does sort of fill the site. You haven't got a great deal of amenity space. And when you look at the street scene, it doesn't add anything. You know, it just looks like a big garage, really, from the street scene point of view, because of its design. So, you know, I'm really swithering on this one. You know, I don't want to turn it down on design because that's just my personal view. And I don't believe that everything has to be a pastiche of what's next door, but I do believe that the palette and the sort of basic feel of an area should be replicated in the materials. And that's why none of these modern houses is identical, or the ones close to me, you know, they have been thought through a little bit, apart from the one that wasn't. So yeah, I'm really struggling with this one. I can't see it adding anything to the street scene because of it being built down. It's not taking advantage of a particular position. You know, a really modern house, the top of a hill looking across, I think is stunning, you know, and I really do think so. This one, I really don't know. I don't like it, but more what really is my problem is its effect on the street scene, or its lack of sort of integration into the street scene. I'm definitely still struggling with this one. Thank you.
Any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillor Molyneux, do you wish to have a final 4 minutes?
Chairman.
No, thank you. I'm glad the committee mentioned. I've listened with interest to the comments, and I'll leave it to them.
Our running order seems to become a little bit confused, certainly. Yes, is the committee agreeable to hearing, Mr. Booth? Yeah, thank you very much. Mr. Booth, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought I was going to miss my turn there. I live with my family at 11 College Hill, which is the property to the east of the application site. So just by a matter of meters. I just want to make a couple of general points before I get on to the specifics of why we're objecting. It's clear that if you read the objection letters that neighbours aren't objecting in principle to development of this site. This isn't a case of being deliberately obstructive. As been discussed previously, this site had already obtained planning permission for a family dwelling. That approval took into account various of the considerations which are relevant now. And one just asks a question, I think, why applicants have decided to pursue this, have decided not to pursue what would have been a far less contentious route towards obtaining their family home. Just turning to the specifics of my objections. This application is similar to another application that was made on a site not too far from this one. So the committee may wish to look back at an application in relation to apple trees, WA 2020-1238. That was at 8A Courts Hill in Hazelmere. So as I say, not very far from this site at all. And the application there was for a very similar type of dwelling. So a modernist box effectively with a flat roof, glass, aluminium and timber, and critically with a terrace as well. And the application was rejected for several other reasons, which I would submit ought to result in the committee refusing this application as well. So the proposed development here, to me, appears entirely at odds and alien to the character of the properties it will sit amongst, and therefore wholly inappropriate for its situation. So the proposal is for a modern angular building, which is constructed of entirely different materials in an entirely different architectural style, taller and bulkier than the previously approved dwelling. At least that's my understanding of the plans. And I didn't catch who made this point previously, but I completely agree in terms of how reliable one can treat the plans that have been put forward here. Critically for my family, this property has an unusually a large first floor terrace, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But look, these aren't just subjective design criticisms, and I know people have mentioned, a desire to avoid that. And I completely agree. But this proposal ignores the requirements, in my view anyway, of relevant planning policies and guidance. I won't list these here because I know the committee will be aware of them. They're cited by the Hazelmere Conservation Area in their objection letter. The applicants rely on the fact that this property doesn't fall within the conservation area, and of course that's undeniable. But I suppose my response to that would be twofold. One, as I've said, this application is inconsistent in my view with other planning policies which do apply. So Waverley Local Plan, Hazelmere Design Statement, which talk about the design of properties. The site, of course, is very close to the conservation area, so it seems to me that it ought to be a relevant consideration. I do question whether the community and in fact the committee would really want to have such an extreme example, in my view, of modernist design in an area which is buttressed up against a conservation area. So this application is for a large statement piece of architecture. It has large windows, metal and glazed balconies. To me, the aesthetics are completely inconsistent with the surrounding properties, and as I mentioned, planning policies as well. I think it would have a detrimental impact on the street scene. I note the comments around the fact that it's hidden by, or said to be shielded by hedging.
Could you conclude, please, Mr. Booth?
Sorry?
Start, Mr. Booth?
Yes?
You have your 4 minutes.
Right, okay. Can I just make one point around the fact that, final point, I apologise for going over, but there was some confusion at the start there, that from a privacy perspective, these balconies will face directly our family home, the master bedroom and the bedroom that my 2 young children currently sleep in. So I have a specific objection from a privacy and an overlooking perspective. I'll conclude that.
Well, I suppose we get there in the end, but I mean, confused way, but can we move to the recommendation, please? The recommendation is that, subject to conditions 1 to 13, and all the information wanted information be granted. Could those in favour please raise their hands, please? Against? Oh, yeah. Abstain? Oh.
Thank you, Chairman. So I have 3 in favour, 4 against and 4 abstentions.
Alternative recommendation, please.
That the application be refused on the grounds of it being contrary to policy D1 and D4 of the neighbourhood of the local plan. Is that the right? I mean, it's design, character and appearance, I think is really what I was thinking of.
Second for that?
Concur.
Thank
you, Chairman. I've put together some wording for a character refusal. The proposed development, by reason of its contemporary flat roof design, its bulk and mass, and the materials proposed, be out of keeping with the appearance of the host dwelling and wider surround. It will be harmful to the visual image of the street scene and wider Half Moon estate, and contrary to policies H3 and H6 of the Hazelmere Neighbourhood Plan 2021, policy TD1 of the local plan Part 1 2018, and retain policies D1 and D4 of the local plan 2002.
Councillor Coburn?
I know we're always told to keep everything trim, and I understand why, but we never seem to sort of concentrate on fenestration and balconies. And, you know, I think they are a real problem for neighbours' amenity. You know, if you've got a wall of window that's lit up at night, plus balconies, is that not any way that we can?
James?
Well, you could potentially argue that's out of character. You would otherwise have to find that that would specifically harm the neighbouring amenity. I think we would struggle to do that. But...
Okay, Councillor Coburn, or not?
Yes, I was only asking for the addition of the word fenestration, but there you go.
Right, okay. You know. Could you just repeat the words you said?
Yes, the wording was the proposed development by reason of its contemporary flat roof design, its bulk and mass, and the materials proposed. Although I do take Councillor Coburn's point, we could add fenestration into that. Yeah, okay. Would be out of keeping with the appearance of the host dwelling and wider surround. It would be harmful to the visual amenity of the street scene and wider Half Moon estates, and contrary to policies H3 and H6 of the Hazelmere Neighbourhood Plan 2021. Policy TD1 of the local plan Part 1 2018, and retain policies D1 and D4 of the local plan 2002.
Yeah. Are you happy with that, with people proposing? Yes, okay. So can we vote on that, please? Those in favour, raise their hands, please. Against? Abstain? Vote, please.
That's 5 again, 5 in favour, none against, and 6 abstentions.
And you refused on those grounds, thank you very much. All right. We carry on. Another Hazelmere application. Before we start this, Kimberly, I have now listed 3 public speakers. Is that right? Because I mean, Mr. Beattie is going to object. Yes.
We've now got Mr. Beattie and Councillor Mulliner.
What about this other?
No, that was the.
Oh, okay. So there's 2 public speakers. Yes. Right, thank you very much. Okay. Right. The application is WA 2022-00419, land at Santis, 42 Courtsmount Road, Hazelmere. Erection of extension and alteration. Sam to present, please. Hello.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. So the proposal agenda A3 is WO 2022-00419. It's Santis 42 Courtsmount Road in Hazelmere for the erection of a first floor side extension and single story rear extension with alterations to fenestrations. So there is the application site is located to the northeast of Courtsmount Road. It's accessed via a private driveway on the junction with Courts Hill Road, Hazelmere. The road comprises large detached dwellings of differing form and design, with Holton House. It's a large retirement complex sat to the south. Officers note the dwelling is sat on steep site levels and owing to its orientation is not directly visible from the road. To the north of the site is Longdean Road with a mix of detached and semi-detached dwellings. So here's an aerial view which highlights the driveway, surrounding dwellings, coupled with Santis, which is sat on a spacious plot. So this is the view from Court Hill Road. As you can see, the dwelling is not directly visible on the street scene. It's sat behind number 40, so the picture on the right, that one to the right is number 40. And then Holton House, the retirement complex, is to the left. And then the picture on the left shows the driveway leading down to Santis. And this is the view from Longdean Road, which is to the north of the application site. This is number 21, number 23, Longdean Road in the foreground. And then you can just about barely make out Santis, which is right directly in the back, the pitched roof, but that was the sort of the best possible way of seeing those site levels. So the front and rear elevation. So the existing 4-bedroom dwelling house is part single story, part 2-story with a detached double garage just out of shot forward of the existing sort of single story outrigger. Regarding the site's planning history, officers do note the comments by neighbours regarding there being a previously refused 2-story extension, but this was in 1966. A revised scheme was then submitted with minor amendments, including a slight variation of materials, which is the approved and built first floor element. Whilst officers do note these comments by neighbours, the principle of development for a first floor side extension is wholly different from the erection of a first floor and raising of the ridge height on a bungalow dwelling. And that's the rear elevation, the bottom picture. This is the photograph to the north of the dwelling. It does show the sort of steeper site levels down to Longdean Road. Whilst this is not noted, officers would highlight the separation distance between properties. These are the existing elevation plans. Garaging is located forward of the outrigger there. The measurements show ridge height of 5 meters on the single story ridge height and 7 meters for the 2-story element. This is the proposed elevation plan. The first floor extension would represent an increase in bulk of the dwelling. Officers note that residential SPD guidance states that 2-story fully integrated side extensions will not normally be permitted unless exceptional circumstances can justify such a design approach. In this instance, the proposal is not readily visible from the street scene, would tie in with the existing 2-story element. The dwelling sits within a large plot which could comfortably take a dwelling with the extensions as proposed. Furthermore, Courtsmount Road is characterised by a mix of architectural styles comprising detached dwellings of differing appearance. Owing to these factors, officers consider the proposed design is not constrained by the need to directly harmonise with adjacent buildings, and a fully integrated first floor extension would be acceptable. sorry, I'll go back to that. So there's also a proposed rear extension, which would be modest, whilst there's also changes to the fenestrations. These would be minor and acceptable. So the proposed floor plans, which would include a change in the ground floor layout and adding a further bedroom with dressing room and ensuite. I think the primary thing for members to consider is the objection by neighbours about sort of overbearing and loss of light. Officers do note these comments of objection. However, residential SBD guidance is clear in stating that there should be a distance of at least 21 metres between proposed windows and those of neighbouring properties. As you can see on this, these are the properties, Longdean Road, with all the separation distances listed between them. Officers also note that guidance states this may be further relaxed if the character of the immediate area suggests that lesser distances may be appropriate. It is in the built-up area of Hazelmere. Officers do note that properties are located to the north and sat down on lower site levels as the site slopes steeply down. However, owing to the previously mentioned separation distances, officers consider there would not be a material impact on light, morning sun, and would not be overbearing in form. So the main points for members to consider are design, impact on visual amenity, and the impact on residential amenity. Officers are recommending approval of this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Sam. Right, now, I believe we have two public speakers on this. This being Mr. Robert Beattie, is he with us? On Zoom, yes. All right, Mr. Beattie, you have 4 minutes to say your piece.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. The unique topography of Hazelmere, as you are all aware, means that not all cases can be resolved by looking at the map. The site levels between 42 Courtsmount Road and the neighbours to the north on Longdean Road make this development equivalent to a 5 to 6 story building being erected just 25 metres south of the properties on Longdean Road. On a flat topography, I would ask if 25 metres would be considered a wide enough gap before placing a 5 to 6 story building south of existing residential property. The impact on residential and visual amenities outside due to the significant uphill position of the southern development. Morning light is impacted by the bungalow and would be worse by the addition of a second story, as with the overbearing form of the expansive looming brick wall. My neighbours who aren't here to speak today particularly enjoy gardening and more feet in their back garden, residential amenity which would be lost to the shadows of this extension. This may sound insignificant, but would have a large impact on the enjoyment of the home. I would ask that prior to any decision to grant permission, a formal site visit was undertaken where the view was taken from the property rather than from the street so that it can't actually see the topographical issues. In response to the officer's comment regarding extension of existing 2-story dwelling as opposed to raising the ridge height on a bungalow, I would note that the existing bungalow had a small first floor added to the south end, far enough back from the properties on Longdean Road that the 7-metre ridge appears in line with the north's 5-metre ridge, therefore not impacting on light or visual amenity for the downhill properties. Considering the size of the property at the time of this addition and the proportionally small first floor erection, this must have been an intentional decision to increase the likelihood of successfully gaining planning permission without causing undue loss of residential or visual amenity to neighbours, as a larger extension would have been desirable if possible, as evidenced by the current application. I would argue that had the initial planning application spanned to the north of the property as the current application does, it would not have been accepted, and the planning system should not be allowing for standards to be bypassed by means of successive piecemeal extension applications. This would be the 4th extension overall to the property. I would also note that in a property where there is opportunity to extend on the ground level and avoid impacting neighbouring properties, we feel this should be considered as an alternative. Finally, there are restrictive covenants in the title for 42 Courtsmount Road, which need to be brought to light before any progress could be made. The title register mentions specifically that on the transfer dated 4th May 1962, there are provisions made regarding light or air and boundary structures. I have not, unfortunately, been able to source the required transfer documents to check the details of the restrictive covenants, However, this needs to be investigated and shared prior to any potential consideration of granting permission for an extension, as these may well restrict the applicant from any plans to obscure light from the properties on Longdean Road as per this current application. To summarise, I request that this is reviewed on the basis that 1, it will impact the lights for our property and neighbouring properties and residential amenity. The building should be considered in its original form as a bungalow due to the very small nature of the initial second story extension. There is an alternative extension option which would not impact on neighbours. And there may be restrictive covenants in place which need to be investigated.
Thank you very much. He's frozen, hasn't he? Yeah, okay. He's frozen. But I presume he's finished by now. Okay, right. Councillor Mulliner again. Councillor Mulliner, you have 4 minutes now, and of course 4 minutes after.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I listened with interest to what Mr. Beattie had to say, and with the exception of the restrictive covenants, which we can't take any account of, as they're a private contractual matter and have no bearing on whether or not planning permission should be granted. I think he's made some very good points, and I would say in particular, as a Hazelmere resident, members who don't know our town as well as we do, I think really would benefit from a site visit. The topography is severe. If you look at page 55 of the agenda pack, you will see that Santis enjoys a middle position, and that is why there's no great problem with this when looking at it from Courts Hill Road, which is where you would normally expect problems to be. But it's so far below that it doesn't really have any impact. But when you look at it from the gardens of the houses below, it becomes very obvious what the problem is from the point of view of the existing occupiers. I would certainly support the comment that the standard separation distances make plenty of sense when looking at flat situations and flat locations, but I submit they can't be allowed to have exactly the same effect when looking at such a steeply sloping one as this. And certainly there is something like a 30 or 40 foot drop from the top of this proposed extension to these gardens. And it does mean that it's much easier to overlook than if you were in a flat situation. So my comments are simply that I think a site visit in this particular case would be extremely important to do justice to both parties. I feel very strongly that the planning system should show, whatever the decision ultimately is, that all the information has been taken into account properly. And in this particular case, the topography is so severe, the slopes are so marked, that unless you've actually been to see it for yourself, it will be difficult to give a completely fair decision to either party. My own view is that I would refuse this. I think there are options, but that's not my role tonight. I'm not a voting member of the committee. I'm just acting as a ward councillor. But having initially been a little sort of uncertain about what I would think, when I actually went and saw what the issue was and the effect of the steepness of the slope between Longdean Road and where Santis is, I was convinced that a site visit was the most important step to enable us as a committee to do justice to this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Of course, you have 4 minutes after the debate. Right, councillors. Councillor Deere.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too am a ward councillor, and I won't say I've been to the site, but I've walked down the driveway. I didn't go on anyone's property. I have to say I've got no problem with this. The increase in height is relatively modest. It's the extension of the existing roof line on the two-storey bit to the rest of the house, and I don't think that's really material in terms of light or sunlight or anything else. I think there is an enhancement of the overall look of the building on both elevations. Yeah, why not? Absolutely no problem at all. Thanks very much.
Any other councillor to speak? Oh, Councillor Beanie.
Thank you, Chair. I too don't see huge difficulties with this one. It does seem to neaten it off. I accept what Councillor Molnar is saying, that there is obviously some views with that height. However, half this building has this height anyway. So as far as I'm concerned, we're making an untidy looking building look actually tidier. So thank you, Councillor Dear. I think I agree with you on this occasion. Thank you.
Councillor Neil.
Thank you. I understand the concerns of those on the height bit, especially with relation to the Longdean Road properties. But as Councillor Dear and others have said, it's not a huge difference to the ridge height that already exists at the eastern end. In terms of overlooking, the overlooking is forwards. It doesn't overlook those properties in Longdean Road, I don't think, because there aren't any windows being added on that elevation. So I'm minded to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Edmonds.
As frequently, there's no restriction on building hours, which is a discretion. Without that imposition of a restriction on building hours, I could not support this application. Thank you.
Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, of course, for those of us that know Hazlemere very well, we know that Longdean Road is not a hill, it's almost a mountain. It's a horrendous, horrendous hill. But I'm not really convinced that this particular extension would impact so greatly on the houses in or the gardens in Longdean Road. So I think at this stage I'm quite minded to say I don't object to it at all.
Any other councillor wish to speak? No. Right. Do you want to your final 4 minutes?
You're muted, Councillor Mulliner. No, you're still muted.
Yeah, sorry, I was having technical problems. Could I ask the officer just to confirm something for me? It's on page 57, and I don't want to either be wrong or mislead anyone. My understanding was that the proposed rear elevation, which is the sort of third row of the top section, that would have some first floor windows, which would have at least an oblique view of the gardens below in Longdean Road. Am I right or am I incorrect?
Councillor Muller, yeah, the front elevation, that's got sort of 3 high level windows. There's no windows looking directly towards Longdean on the first floor side elevation. And then you have sort of 3 or 4 first floor windows at the rear, but because of its sort of orientation, it wouldn't be sort of have direct outlook, it would be oblique in a sense.
But you would be able to look through them and look down into the gardens.
Yes, it would be looking directly towards the northeast, but sort of away from the properties. But we consider with obviously that separation distance of though I mean from 19A, it's sort of 31 meters, 26 meters, 28 meters. That realistically you wouldn't be able to see much with those sort of distances.
Thank you for your comments. Chairman, I will simply leave it there. As this is one of those few occasions where I think a site visit would be important. I can recall one where I think it almost certainly led to the committee having a change of heart over it. There was somewhere else in Hazlemere, and I remain of the opinion that would be a good idea. But I'll obviously leave it to the committee. Thank you.
Right. Which is recommendation, that's subject to conditions 1 to 3, and the informative permission be granted. Those in favour, please raise their hands. You want to vote once, Councillor Edmonds? how much you maybe, okay? Please.
Thank you, Chairman. I therefore have 10 in favour and 1 against.
And there's all permission is granted. Thank you very much. Right, we move on to application, not subject to public speaking, and we lose Beth at this point, I believe. Thank you. Well, I'll just summarize it. WA 2022-00251, the land at Orchard View, Forest Road, Hazelmere, G27 3SB, the erection of an extension and raised flagstone terrace with guardrails, a revision of WA 2021-02436, as amended by plans received on the 5th of May. Right, so I would best go, and then Dan, you are to present, yes?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. This application has been brought before the Planning Committee as it falls outside of the scheme of delegation, as the agent is related to a member of staff. Planning permission is sought for a single-storey extension at lower ground floor level to the side and rear of Orchard View, Sturt Road. A raised flagstone terrace is also proposed to the rear with the guardrails. This slide shows the location plan. The application site lies to the southwest of Sturt Road and is residential and semi-rural in character. It is located within the countryside beyond the Greenbelt and the Riverway conservation area. The dwelling house appears as 2-storey to the front and 3-storey to the rear with a lower ground floor. There is a detached garage to the front of the site. The aerial view shows the extent of the plot and its relationship with neighbouring properties. This is the block plan. It shows the location of the proposed development in relation to neighbouring properties. And some photos. The top left photo showed the front of the property. The top right shows the rear of the property. The bottom left showed the southeast boundary with number 6 Sturt Road, and the bottom right photo shows the northwest boundary with number 2 Sturt Road. The existing and proposed plans. So these are the existing and proposed lower ground floor and roof plans at Orchard View. And these are the proposed elevations. These show the front, rear and side elevations of the extension and the flagstone terrace. Alterations are proposed to the lower ground floor fenestration. A 1.7 metre high obscure glazed screen would be provided to the southeast side of the raised terrace to prevent material overlooking or loss of privacy to the occupiers of number 6 Sturt Road. That's shown on the bottom left picture there. The main matters for consideration are character. The proposed location, scale, form, design and materials would be well related to the existing built form and would protect the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside beyond the Greenbelt. The design would complement the existing property and, having regard to the location predominantly to the rear of the property, would not appear prominent or intrusive in the street scene. A condition is imposed to control external lighting to protect the dark skies environment. The Riverway conservation area. The council's conservation officer has assessed the proposals and considers that there would be no detrimental impact. Due to the topography of the site, the proposed development would not be prominent from the public realm. The proposals would be well related in scale, form and appearance to the existing built form and would not harm the significance of the conservation area and would preserve its character. Residential amenity. The proposals comply with the council's residential extensions SPD in relation to overbearing form and loss of light. Having regard to the close proximity of the raised terrace, which is 3.3 metres to the shared boundary with number 6, a condition is recommended to control the provision of a 1.7 metre high screen to prevent material overlooking or loss of privacy. Having regard to the location of a shed, double garage and a raised vegetable garden adjacent to the boundary on the other side at number 2, it is considered that the proposals would be set a sufficient distance from this property and its main rear private garden amenity area so as not to cause material overlooking or loss of privacy. The amended lower ground floor fenestration in the rear elevation of the property would have their main aspect over the rear garden. And then finally, the impact on the ordinary watercourse. There's an ordinary watercourse to the rear of the property. The proposed development would retain a 5 metre gap in accordance with policy NE2 of Local Plan Part 1. The planning balance assessment concludes that the proposal is in accordance with the development plan, and as such, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillors, anybody wish to speak on this item?
As before, I would not be complicit in the LPA not putting any limitation on building hours and the consequence of mental health that might occur. So I will object on those grounds. Thank you, Chair.
Any other councillors wish to speak? No. Right, okay, well, I'm going to move to the recommendation then. Recommendation that subject to conditions 1 to 4 and advice 1 and 2, permission be granted. Those in favour, please raise their hands. Yeah. And those against? Abstain. Result, please, Kimberly.
Thank you, Chairman. That's 10 in favour, 1 against and no abstentions.
Then the application is granted herewith. There being no exempt items to discuss, the meeting is closed. Safe journey home.